What? Chips? Trying to mute everybody.
Okay, now everyone is muted. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this new course. And this is a new adventure for us to do a class in person and on Zoom. For those who have trouble with Zoom, we set up here outside our tent. We're sitting here with social distancing. It's safe. So I welcome everyone here in person and everyone here on Zoom. And I'm very honored to have you all here to join us for this journey. The topic of the course is life and death in Judaism, a very important and a difficult topic. Um, and it's when I put this together, starting this class today, I didn't envision that I was unfortunately very busy with three burials this week alone. And Lily just came in from a funeral, Lily, a few minutes ago this morning. So forgive me if I'm a little bit out of breath, but I will give everything I can to share. This is going to be a journey. We put away 6 weeks to discuss, to go through some of the topics. We will have some guest speaker to come in and speak with us via Zoom as well. I have booked a world-renowned speaker on the topic of burial and cremation out of Israel for February 18th, I believe, on Thursday. And look up your emails as we're going to announce these dates as we move further. They're going to bring out the handouts. My secretary is printing it, those who are here, and we'll get started. Let me pull up my notes. Well, the handouts are not going to be as extensive as we typically, those who attend our JLI courses. It comes with a thick textbook. I have elected don't do that much text. Rather, we have more of a educational conversation. Many of you have questions. I'm going to give time for questions, and sometimes there'll be topics that we are going to be important that we might not touch upon today. We'll have time in another time. Typically, our classes will go around 45 minutes to an hour. Um, Try to finish about 45 minutes and give about 15 minutes for question and answers. And I'm always available for after hours, after the class, if you have questions to ask. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Um,
Rabbi, you need to tell people who have just joined to mute. We're getting some distortion.
okay, so what I'm going to go quick in my setting. So if you joined, please mute yourself. I'm trying to juggle to run the Zoom in person. So it's Carrie. Let's see here. I can. All right. Yes. Please mute yourself if you come in class, and when there will be time for questions, you can unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat box for questions, and I will do my best. I want to welcome some of our new guests and neighbors in our town or out of town. Some of you I know are from out of town, which is the great thing about Zoom. You can be anywhere. You can be in Alaska and join the class. Maybe I can go to Alaska and give the class from there. Anybody want to take me to Alaska? Okay, thank you. All right. I do want to make sure that this doesn't become a very depressing topic to discuss. Um, and I will from time to time inject anecdotes and stories because more than death, it's more about life and living life to its fullest and live life with meaning and purpose. So, um, we'll start with a anecdote of people sitting on a plane, and the announcement is that the pilots have been delayed, and everyone's waiting for the pilots to come from another plane. Everyone's sitting and waiting, and finally the pilots arrive. And to everyone's shock, they can't believe the two pilots that come into the plane are blind. They're blind. They're walking with their white stick, and they're walking through the aisle, and they're banging into each other, and everyone's like, "What? These are the pilots?" But it's Delta Airlines. You gotta trust. Sure enough, they take their seats, and everyone is really nervous, and the plane starts to take off and goes faster and faster, and it's not taking off. It's just going quicker on the on the tarmac, and everyone is like starting slowly to yell and scream, and everyone's screaming because they're not taking off. They're just going faster and faster. And the very last moment, the scream gets so loud, boom, the plane goes up. And one pilot turns to the other and says, "What are we gonna do if people don't scream? How are we gonna know when to take off?" So when it comes to end of life and death, unfortunately, many times we get hit in our face, so to speak, when something tragic happens, when there's a loss of a loved one, and we are in a very an emotional state, and it's difficult to make decisions and understand. Um, so, as a rabbi, I've been a rabbi in a young community like ours. I've been encountered so many difficult situations where we had to guide people through it in a time when people were very vulnerable and in a difficult time to discuss and educate people. So I wanted to do this class so many times where we can discuss it when we are in a better state of mind, because many of you have encountered um, death of a loved ones, and everybody in everybody's mind is our mortality, because um, it's something that's a difficult topic we don't want to talk about, but we do want to talk. And from my experience, the more I talk to people about it, it brings a lot of comfort and kind of direction to people. That's kind of a little introduction. Um, Another thing I want to share um, is that, and I'd like to welcome my mother's. My mother just joined. Um, that's now I'm under tremendous pressure. My mother's on Zoom. My mother lives in Switzerland. So, hi, mommy. Okay, huh? Yes, she's from Switzerland, but she's actually in New York already the last few months, in good health. So, all right, I have to change my whole lecture right now. Okay, I did I as another introduction, I'm gonna share a lot of the meaning behind what we do. Judaism is full of rituals, full of traditions, and many times when I get a call for this is like a typical call I can get, you know, a call from random somebody I don't know in the community or lives in the neighborhood, and the call goes like this: "Hi," and the first thing say, "We are not Orthodox, but we need a rabbi to do a funeral. Would you officiate?" I said, "Of course." Um, so what do I have to do? And they kept saying, but we're not Orthodox. And I would say, well, we need to do the Jewish traditions that go with a burial, like tahara, washing, the ritual washing of the body, a proper Jewish burial. But we are not Orthodox. Can we do without it? And then I go and explain the beauty and the meaning behind tahara, which we're going to explain in our classes. And then the lady would say, well, my husband deserves to get that honor, right? And then the next thing, but we're not Orthodox. So the moment they understand what it is many times, and you don't have to be Orthodox to be allowed or to have the beauty that comes with 3,000 years of tradition and those teachings. One more introduction to this, and that is okay. Never mind. Let's get started. So when we talk about death, in order to really understand death in Judaism, which is a huge topic, we need to first understand what is life in Judaism. Um, so life in Judaism, as we say, begins at birth, right? When does life begin? At birth. So here's a little joke. There was a rabbi and a priest. They get together for lunch once a week and they discuss their religion. And the rabbi turns to the priest and says, when do you believe life begins? And the priest says, we believe that life begins at conception. How about you, Rabbi? When do you Jews believe life begins? And the rabbi says, we believe that life begins when the kids go to college and leave the house. That's when life begins. But in all in all seriousness, we always have. Oh, this was the introduction I want to say. Forgive me again that I'm sometimes a little bit submished. So many times when I would discuss with people certain things, not only in when it comes to death and burials, it's like, oh, the rabbis made that up, right? You hear that many times. It's not in the Torah. It's the rabbis made it up. So allow me to share something I had a good friend of mine share that with me. He's a rabbi in California, and he had a family out of South Africa. We have here.
Can you make the volume a little bit louder? I can hardly hear.
Ivy. Okay, I'll go speak up. How's now? Better?
That much better. Thank you.
Let's put the computer close. Thank you, Cynthia. We have a Dr. Calvario who's here, my doctor, and he's originally from South Africa. So here's a story of a group from South Africa. There were two brothers that were in California for a simcha, for a Bar Mitzvah, and unfortunately, while they were there, their mother passed away. Now, in South Africa, unlike in America, the communities they have a very strong attachment to their shuls, to the kahila. Even if they're not observant, they're very traditional. And in every kahila, there is a cheva kadisha, a burial society, who takes care, and we have established that here as well. Takes care of the burial and the requirements. And something we're going to discuss is also, as you hear many times, we need to bury a person as soon as possible. You hear sometimes within 24 hours. Well, there are exceptions to that, and we're going to discuss this. But going from California to South Africa, and it was on a Wednesday, it would meant that the funeral would not happen till after Shabbos, and the decision was made that they're not going to wait for family to come back. It would better to honor the person is to bury them. So they're sitting in California on a video call. I think it was before Zoom, and watching, listening in, and then sitting shiva. And one of the members is a psychologist who counsels people in mourning, and he was one of the children. And while going through this whole process of Shiva, which we said Shiva 7 days, he said it is unbelievable how the rabbis back 2,000 years ago understood what we psychologists tell people today. Psychology today says today how to mourn a loved one, to sit for 7 days, to talk about the memories and the stories. It is so critical for people to be able to process a death. So when many times you hear the notion that rabbis make things up, the rabbis are we talking about, our rabbis, our sages from 3,000 years ago, who didn't make things up. They rather shared from the Torah, wisdom of the Torah, from the written Torah and from the oral Torah. And I encourage you to listen and to study what they had to say. And as I just shared, today throughout Jewish life cycle observance, very much it is not, they wasn't just laws and rules they made, but it was in line to how people process things, how people process with their soul, the mental and physical well-being. So with that, let's begin with life and birth. So we know that a person gets born, and what happens at birth is that we get a soul and a body. Every human being, everyone knows the famous line in the Torah that God created Adam in God's image. And you can look at your source sheet, text 1. This is in Genesis 2, when God created at the sixth day of creation Adam. By the way, why did God call Adam Adam? There's two answers to that question. Adam in Hebrew comes from the word of Adamah. Adamah means earth. God took, and look in here in text 1, and Hashem Elohim formed the human of soil from the earth. So the body was formed out of soil, and breathed into his nostril the breath of life, and a man became a living soul. So God blew a living soul in Adam. So Adam comes from earth. The body was made out of earth. In Hebrew, Adam, the Zohar says, also can mean the word Adam, Adamah Elyon, a reflection of Elyon, of God above. Man was created in God's image. What constitutes God's image? The soul that God blew in the nostril. If you pay attention, everything God created in the words of the Torah, God spoke. In the beginning, God said, let there be light. So it was through speech. Obviously, it's not physical speech, but God speaks in the language of man. The only thing, so God created heaven and earth. Let there be heaven, let there be earth. Everything was speech. God spoke and it came to be. Side note, what's the word magician do before they do a trick? What did they say? I can hear you. Abracadabra, right? Do you know what that means? It's taken from Hebrew, actually from Aramaic. Listen to this. In Aramaic, abracadabra means abra, means to create, kedabra, kedibur, as I speak. Like God spoke and created, magicians took that line, abracadabra. By raising hands, anybody knew that? Okay, you learned something new today. Huh? Ronnie, great job. We have a prayer we say every morning. Baruch she'omar v'haya ha'olam. Blessed is who spoke and the world came into being. So creation was through speech. The only creation that was through blowing, so to speak, was the soul. Says the Holy Tanya. Why? Because the soul is not just a creation of God, but it's actually a God of himself. When you blow, it comes from the inside. It's a metaphor that God says, I blew a living soul. I gave a piece of myself into Adam, and by extension, into every human being. That is what makes the soul eternal. Just like God is eternal, the soul is eternal. So in essence, our soul always existed before we were born, and critical, it continues to live on after we die. Now, everyone's going to want to know, so where was I in a previous generation? I will attempt to make one class on Gilgul, on reincarnations and afterlife and paradise and Gehenna, all those topics. These are big topics. I will try, I believe that, to do one class. As you can see, as I'm going through this, every topic is another 6-week course, but we'll try to get to the thing. So thank God we live in Venice. Everyone here is relaxed and retired, right? You're in quarantine, not in quarantine. my friends, my colleagues around this country think I'm crazy giving a class 1 in the afternoon on a Thursday. So, but that's the blessing, which we're going to go to also. How do we see retirement, golden age in Judaism? So, going further, so the process of birth is a very powerful moment. Why? Because the soul is in a complete culture shock. The soul is coming from a very high spiritual world down, landing in this physical world in a physical body. It is the body and soul that come together. That is the miracle of birth, which starts at conception, 9 months in the mother's womb, birth. Um, Birth is a very spiritual experience, but the soul is very confused. What just happened? Where am I? Right? So just imagine the soul, and this is every soul, no matter what. And I want to add one more thing as I was reading text one. The Hebrew word for soul is what? Neshama. What's neshama? Neshama in Hebrew means breath, to breathe. Why is it called breath? You know it already, right? God breathed a living soul. In essence, in Psalm, we say, Kol haneshama to hallelujah, hallelujah. And David says, for every breath I take, I praise you, Lord. Every breath. Every breath, in essence, is like God blowing a living soul in a nostril. It's a gift. It's a gift of life. And so why in the world does the soul have to come into our body? If the soul was in heaven before we were born, right? So why in the world, pun intended, does it have to come down to this world to be in a body? Which is the bigger question of what is the purpose of creation? Why did God created a universe? Which is another 6-week course, right? But in a nutshell, the purpose of creation, and for those who are not so familiar with our Tanya teaching in Kabbalah, the world that we live in, the physical world, is kind of the lowest station in the bigger in the bigger phycture of God's universe. You see, God in God's universe, there's a spiritual world and there's a physical world. The spiritual worlds, there are many infinite amounts of spiritual worlds which are hard to grasp. And when we say Garden of Eden is really a spiritual location that is not a physical location, which is where space and time don't really exist. Space and time only existed at time of as God created this physical world. But if God had angels and spirituality, what did He need a physical world for? Right? Look what kind of world we're living in. It's not the most spiritual place. So the short answer is the word that many of you know, tikkun olam. What does tikkun olam mean? To fix the world, right? And everybody has a different understanding. What does fixing the world mean? Some people fixing the world is recycling, right? Tikkun olam. Some people it is to deliver food. Some people it is tikkun olam. Wherever I can fix something I see that is not complete, which is all true. And this is actually the purpose. The purpose, God created the world because God desired people, a universe that can create a place where there is goodness and kindness, where there's a place where God feels at home, God feels comfortable. Where does God feel comfortable? When there is shalom, when there is peace, when there is goodness, when there's kindness. So Hashem gave us the universe and he placed Adam at the very end of creation. First, he created everything, created Adam at the very end, because we are the highest of all of creation. In order to elevate the world and fix the world, meaning to bring light of Hashem, to bring the light of God, of mitzvot, of goodness in every area of the universe, to make this world a very special, beautiful world. And that's what we are working on, and that's what we are yearning to transform the world. So, which means that for that, the soul itself needs to be in a body. The soul itself cannot perform anything in this physical world if it doesn't have a vehicle. So just when you have two people speaking two different languages, what do you need? A translator, right? A translator, or Google Translate today. But a translator, the soul speaks a language, but it doesn't speak in a sense the language of the world. It cannot express itself. It needs a body or like a spacesuit to operate. So God tells the soul, I want you to go down to this world, to journey, but there's a purpose. There's a purpose for you to accomplish something. You are a divine spark that has divine energy. And that is what makes human a human. What makes us alive? It is the soul that is the energy that gives us life, that gives us the motivation, innovation to think, to operate. Yes, animals have also a soul, which is another conversation, but the soul can only operate in a body. And there's a mission for every single soul. There is not one soul that is here in this world by mistake. There is nothing, one of the tenets of Judaism is that nothing happens by mistake or by chance. Everything that happens is by divine providence. Every little thing. It's hard to grasp. The world is so big, but God is infinite. And for an infinite God or beyond infinite, it's not a big deal. But if we believe that everything that happens is by divine providence, so then nothing happens by chance, which means that every moment is a meaningful, purposeful moment. Every place I find myself. The fact that God has given me a soul and brought me down to this world, I have a purpose and a mission to fulfill. And every human has a unique mission that only they can fulfill and nobody else can fulfill for them. We are a piece of a bigger puzzle. And every human gets a certain amount of years that they can fulfill the mission. And when the mission is complete, we return our souls to our maker and our bodies passes away. So that's critical to understand in order to value and understand how we look at death and burial, etc., etc. Well, this will understand Kaddish and Shiva and all the other topics that we're going to discuss. If you look in text 2, which talks about the eternity of the soul, which is in text 2, it reads, God did what he had not done with any other creature. He blew into Adam with his holy breath, a neshama that is immortal and that does not perish when the body does. And now you understand the belief that a soul never dies. A body is what dies, a soul never dies. So how do we look at body itself? So what is the body? Is it just a vehicle? So the merging of soul and body at birth is like a marriage where body and soul become partners in crime. They're partners because the body can only operate with the soul and the soul cannot express itself without the body. So without going into the different souls like we learn in Tanya, the animal soul and God the soul, but in the partnership is so the fusion is so powerful that when death happens, it's extremely painful for the soul to separate from the body. So even after somebody passes away, the body still remains sacred, and the body needs to be treated as if it is a living body. Hence, we go out of our ways to respect and show dignity to our body. And as we read, God says, from earth you shall come, and as the Torah says somewhere else, and from earth you shall return. We need to ensure that the body goes back to the earth and disintegrates. Hence, the whole topic how cremation is a big no-no in Judaism, because we look at a deceased body just like a living organ, and you will never take a living person and throw them in a fire. And I say that with sensitivity, and I know some people have relatives who have done it, and forgive me, but we're going to discuss it in a whole nother topic in a more sensitive way. But the point here I'm trying to emphasize is we honor and show that respect to a deceased body. The best analogy to put this in your mind is a Torah scroll. All right, A Torah scroll. What is a Torah scroll? How do you make a Torah? A Torah scroll is a piece of parchment. What's a piece of parchment? Skin of an animal, skin of a cow, right? It's not holy, it's not sacred, just be a skin. But then a scribe goes and with a feather and ink writes the holy words of the Torah. And once it writes the holy words of the Torah, a Torah scroll, a mezuzah, a tefillin, it becomes a holy object. It becomes one of the most holiest objects. What happens if you no longer need the mezuzah or the Torah is no longer readable, or it's a Torah that is old from the Holocaust, it's hard to read from it? We just don't throw the Torah in the garbage. We just don't throw and burn the Torah. Torah is a holy object. Now, how did it become holy? It was a piece of skin. It became holy because the words of God were written on it. So look yourself as a Torah scroll. Every human is like a Torah scroll, where the body is like the parchment and the soul is like the ink. And even if the soul leaves the body, as we're going to learn, one part of the soul always remains with the body even after death. Hence, we go to a gravesite to pray at the gravesite, to put a stone on the gravesite, because there is a soul connection even after death at the place of burial. So, one more thing. Time is going fast, and that is the importance of a action, the importance of a mitzvah, which only the body can do. So the soul needs the body to perform an action. We know that in Judaism, the expression is, right? What's the most important thing? You have to be a mensch, right? You have to be a mensch. What is a mensch? In Yiddish, a mensch means a man, means a human, right? You have to be a human, but it's not really that. It's much more than that. A mensch is to be a decent, good person, right? My mother always told me to be a mensch because she's still here. One of the best praises you can give a person, you're a mensch. So the soul. So which point is that in Judaism we emphasize always action. It's action that counts. You can think and feel all day long, right? You can think and feel to feed the poor, but if you don't do it, you miss the point. Judaism is an action-oriented religion, which is another the topic. If Judaism is a religion or Judaism is more of a way of life, and for that we have the mitzvot. What are mitzvot? Mitzvot, most people just translate as commandments, right? Many are familiar with the 10 commandments. We have actually a lot more than 10 commandments. We have 613 commandments. But the mitzvot are not really commandments only. Rather, in Hebrew, the word mitzvah can also come from the word of tzavta, which means a connection. A mitzvah is a way to connect with God through an action. God says, keep Shabbat, give tzedakah. When I do tzedakah, when I do Shabbat, I connect to Hashem. But more than connecting to Hashem, a body and soul, the challenge is that we are not always in touch with our souls. Everybody possesses a soul, but we don't always feel or talk or understand the language of the soul. We have bodily the desires and pleasures. The body says the body by definition is selfish. The soul is selfless. Freedom of choice is one of the tenets, right? God created us with freedom of choice. If we would just be soul people, we wouldn't have freedom of choice. We always do good. So God gave us a body, so to speak, that will always challenge us. Hence, we have real freedom of choice. So the body wants to be selfish. The soul wants to be selfless. So the fact that you have struggles, and we all have struggles, is not something wrong with you, it's who you are. We all wired this way. So you struggle, should I volunteer or shouldn't volunteer? Should I go to the beach or should I volunteer? My neighbor needs me to take them to the hospital, right? That's the inner struggle. So if you listen to this, it's between the conversation is between your body and your soul. the question is, who wins the game? Who wins the war, right? And that is an ongoing struggle between body and soul. The point is that the soul needs the body to come along. Otherwise, the soul can want to give tzedakah, but he needs to have the money of the body and the hand of the body to actually write the check. The analogy is given in the Talmud that there was a king who had two gardeners. One was lame and one was blind. One couldn't walk and one couldn't see. And they're sitting around the beautiful garden. They see this tree with this most delicious fruit. It's a little bit high up. Who sees it? The lame one sees it, tells the blind one, I see a fruit. I want to eat from it, but I have a problem. I can't walk. You cannot see. How about you pick me up on your shoulder and I'll tell you how to go and we'll take down the fruit and we'll eat together. Good plan. They do it. They eat the fruit. The king finds out, calls them into his chamber and accuses them of the crime of eating from his fruits. And the lame says, wasn't me. How can it be? I can't even walk. And the blind says, it wasn't me. I can't even see. And the king says, I'll show you how. He picks up the blind one, picks up the lame one, puts it on the blind one, and says, this is how you did it. The body is like lame. It cannot walk. It cannot do actions. It can see everything. It can understand the purpose and meaning of every moment. The soul, right? The body is blind. It can walk. It can do things, but it doesn't appreciate the soulful moments while we're here. So God put us together so we are this perfect partner. It is our job to identify what the soul is all about, to understand the language of the soul through the mind that is in our body. So every experience should become a soulful experience. And for that reason, every life cycle is very much embedded with what is the soul going through in this life cycle. And the rituals that come along with it is really a soulful experience. Not only in life cycle, holidays, holiday celebration, Passover. Passover is not just a story we're celebrating. Passover is a soulful experience that we are tapping into the energy of freedom that the soul can experience with the body. Hence, we have the rituals. When I eat matzah, it's not about eating a cracker, but it becomes a soulful experience. For example, not just holidays, Shabbat, not just Shabbat, every single day. And the challenge is every single moment. We have the way we live our lives. Our rabbis have given us the tools to make it more soulful. And we're going to give two examples and two exercises that you can walk away with, that to make your life, to enrich your life with more soulful moments. And for that, we're going to, and before I go to those prayers, I want to just quickly go through life cycle events in Judaism and how and what they mean to the soul and body relationship. Am I being clear till now? I'm sure many of you have questions, but can you still hear me clear? All right, beautiful. Okay, for the last five minutes of the class, let's talk about Jewish life cycles. So we have birth. What happens at birth? If it's a baby boy, there is a Brit Milah, the circumcision at the 8th day of birth. At the Brit, we give the baby boy a Jewish name. A baby girl, we give also a Jewish name, ideally at the first Torah reading at the synagogue. If you didn't have a baby naming, a Jewish baby naming, it is never too late. You can always still do it. And I'll get back to this quickly. Then after that, what's the next big Jewish life cycle? Bar or Bar Mitzvah. Bar Mitzvah at 13, girls at 12, Bat Mitzvah. The next life cycle event is a wedding, marriage, right? And the next one is retirement. Right? But and unfortunately, the next big life cycle event is a death, is end of life. At birth, which I explained, big main topic of today's class is the merging of body and soul. The soul develops just like the body develops. The soul develops into adulthood. In order to develop the soul, we need to do certain tools to allow the soul to infuse into the body, which is why we do circumcision, which is the covenant. It's the only real mitzvah, right, that we actually changing something in our bodies. Right? If I put on tefillin, I put it on my arm or I write tzedakah, but it doesn't stick to my body. It's at the moment I do the mitzvah, my body is active. Brit Milah is an actual change in the physical flesh. That is a connection, which is the whole idea of body and soul. And not for today's class. And reason women don't have a Brit Milah is mainly, as the Zohar explains, the soul of women are from a much higher spiritual level than men and do not need a physical action to make that transformation, the infusion of body and soul. In other words, they are born with the infusion. Hence, we see women in general are much more spiritual in nature, which will lead to other conversations of women's role in Judaism. It is by no means that they are looked at a lower level. On the contrary, they're on a much more spiritual level. Hence, they don't have to do so many things as men to be in touch with their soul. And if we understand that, also it will answer many questions and misconceptions that are out there. But then becomes a boy, and that's why, by the way, girls are bar mitzvah at 12, because they are much more spiritually advanced than boys. Hence, what is a bar mitzvah, right? Not just parties and gifts and haftorah. The whole thing about bar mitzvah means that the soul becomes fully developed as an adult, which means that now they are responsible for their actions. If you look at life, the life is a life of meaning and purpose, and there's a mission on why you're here on this earth. A child at that age is taught and educated that at that age, you are now responsible for your action, and your soul and body are fully integrated as an adult as a result. And that is the underlining celebration. And it's a lifelong celebration. It's not a one-time bar mitzvah party. Then comes a very fascinating topic, and that's another 6-week course, marriage, right? Many times we get married. What's the expression? I find my soulmate, right? My soulmate. It is actually, the sources are in the Talmud that marriage is two souls, or rather two half souls that come together, become a complete soul. Hence the separation of death of a loved one, of a spouse, is only a bodily separation, not a soul separation. And I know there's going to be questions. First marriage, second marriage, how does it work? Reincarnation. We'll get there. I think maybe we'll have to have an 18-week course, but let's try to get that is the beauty of a chuppah. When we stand under the chuppah, we circle 7 times, right? Circle 7 times under the chuppah. There's the ring. It represents the circle of life cycle, 7 days of creation. We're bringing together the soul and the body in full. This is every ritual in Judaism is not only meaning, but is actually and this is very important. It is an actual key to the soul's and body process. So, we can understand that when you type an address on your internet, right? You type an address, 7 days of creation. 7 is a cycle of nature. if you go on a website, right, and you mistype one letter, you're going to end up somewhere else. Rituals, mitzvot, minhagim, as we're going to discuss, these are all puzzles. They're all energies and codes to facilitate the energy and the blessing that we're trying to put together. So that's why don't dismiss certain things, even if you don't see yourself as observant and orthodox. It doesn't mean that you don't get access or you're not permitted to understand those things and take advantage of those beautiful ideas, and to do them. Which brings us to end of life, which I don't think we're going to discuss today in detail. Hopefully next week we'll discuss end of life, how we look at illness, how we look at sometimes making questions of end of life decisions, the death, and we'll get into burial, Kaddish, Shiva, 30 days, Shloshim, Yortzeit, mourners, all those big questions that we want to understand. We will hopefully discuss. I'm going to conclude with two prayers that I printed out for you. I want you to look at page 2, and that is, many of you are familiar with, and that is the blessing of the prayer upon waking up every single morning. When we go to sleep at night, it is in the Zohar, it says, and the Talmud's mentioned, you're experiencing a 1/60th of death while you're sleeping. We're going to learn that death is a process of renewal, of rebirth, of re-energizing. Hence, when we sleep, our bodies rest up. The body's functions physically is all a result how it's also wired spiritually. So when we sleep, our souls leave our bodies to a certain extent, and it is on a higher spiritual level. Hence, we can discuss dreams one day, and we can have very interesting dreams. And we have access to spiritual things while we're sleeping if we are prepared. But mainly, when we wake up in the morning, it is like a mini birth, or as the Talmud says, it is a mini tchiyat hametim, a mini resurrection that you're experiencing. And the first thing we do is, when we wake up in the morning, we train ourselves to show gratitude to Hashem. When you start with your day with gratitude, it makes your day meaningful. You understand going out to the world. It puts your mission right on track when you wake up with Modeh Ani. So the prayer is, we'll say it together, Modeh Ani lefanecha, Melech Chai v'Kayam, shehechazarta bi nishmati, bechemla rabba emunatecha. I gratefully thank you, O living and eternal King, for you have returned my soul within me with compassion. Abundant is your faithfulness. So in this little line, 13 words, I once heard that a physician said, when you wake up in the morning, you should not jump out of bed. It's dangerous. When you wake up and jump out of bed, you should take 13 seconds before you get out of bed. Our sages gave us 13 words. So take about 13 seconds to say this. Keep this next to your bed and say those words. Close your eyes, open your eyes. But in it, it talks about the eternity, just like God is eternal. And God gave me a soul back, my soul, which is your soul. But God said, but I'm grateful God gave me the gift of the soul and has faith. We have faith in Hashem, but God also has faith in me that I will do the best and take care of our souls. Which brings me to, it's late, but let's do this prayer on the bottom, which is the prayer of Elokai Neshama. And we'll read it in English. May God, the soul, Neshama, which you have given me, it is pure. You created it. You have formed it. You have breath into me, and you protect it within me. You will in the future take it from me and return it to me at a later time. As long as my soul is within me, I thank you, my God and God of my forefathers, master of all works and ruler of all souls. Blessed are you, God, who returns souls to lifeless corpses. That's everything we just talked about. We're literally lifeless corpses walking around. If God wouldn't give us a soul, we wouldn't be alive. We got to recognize that. So this is the elaborated prayer after Modeh Ani that we say. But the last prayer on the last page, you know, they say in Judaism, there's a prayer for everything, right? What does Fiddler on the Roof say? What's the prayer for the Tsar, right? There's even a prayer for the Tsar in Russia, right? What was the prayer? May God keep the Tsar far away. Huh? So in everything we do, there is always a prayer. Prayer. Even at the most difficult moments of death, there is a prayer we say, which we'll talk about, God willing. But before we eat, we say a prayer. So many of you know familiar with before we make the blessing on the challah, on the bread, we say Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. The prayer I have here is the prayer we do on any food that are not bread or vegetable or fruits. Every time I take a drink, every time I take water, so you have water next to you, we'll make this blessing. It's a very simple blessing, a very meaningful blessing. And you have here, we're not going to go through the inside elaboration, but let's just read the bold. So I'll make the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh bidvaro. Baruch in Hebrew means blessed. Atah is you. Adonai is God. Elokeinu our God. Melech haolam, King of the universe. Shehakol niyeh bidvaro, by whose words all things came to be. We recognize that everything that happens to us, going back to what I said earlier, that everything happens by divine providence. Everything happens by God's words. If you recognize that me drinking water, that you drink water, and you make a blessing before, recognizing that everything comes from God, that puts you in a mindset that everything that I do is for a purpose and meaning. So why am I drinking? Why am I eating? Why am I sleeping? It's also I can have strength. I can have health. So if I have a healthy body, my soul can be healthy too. If my body is unhealthy, then how can my soul serve Hashem? The sanctity of the body is a big topic in Judaism. The bodies don't belong to us. The bodies are given to us on collateral. Hence, you have the prohibitions of damaging your body. We're not allowed to do dangerous stuff, right? Pikuach nefesh. All the laws of Torah are suspended when it comes to life and death dangers. We're not allowed to mutilate our bodies, tattoos and stuff like that, which is a discussion, which is because it's not mine to do it. So, but on a positive note, an empowering mode, every moment of your life is meaningful. You can train yourself with this blessing before you take a drink. Make that meditation. It gives you the meditation on the side. And with this, hopefully, we can have a more meaningful and purposeful life and moments, and we can approach many other challenging times. In Judaism, we have learned to have joy with the oi, right? We know sometimes life is not easy. There are challenges, there are losses, there are tragedies, but we have never stopped smiling and celebrating life. 3,000 years we have been going through difficult times, a lot more difficult times than we're living today. But we persevered, Am Yisrael Chai, because we knew the secret to life is not the physical, the mundane. The secret is that we are on this earth to make a difference. We have a soul, a very powerful soul, and that nobody can touch and nobody can take away from us. And if we have that secret information, that education that we can acquire and learn and talk more about, with the most difficult times, if there's meaning, we have way to go through them. So thank you. I will take some questions. and we will continue, of course, the class next week. If there's any questions, you can unmute yourself. Any questions in the crowd?
Well, there's a new word for me.
Yeah.
Lefanech.
Huh?
I never heard that before.
Moda'ani lefanecha.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, lefanecha is in front of me. Lefanecha in Hebrew means in front of me,
Oh,
or in front of you. I
oh.
thank you.
Before you.
Any other questions?
Rabbi, I apologize in advance. I've got another Zoom.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you.
It's nice meeting you. Dr. Calavari, you have a question?
Yeah, a simple question. You mentioned the word mensch.
Yep.
In this age of political gender correctness, is there a female equivalent, or are ladies also mention?
Oh, mention in Yiddish is not male. It's male and female.
A mensch is both genders.
Yeah, both genders. Yes, yes. It comes from German, and German's my first language.
Okay.
It's in German. It will be Mann and Frau. Menschen is humans.
Got it. You also mentioned that tattoos are prohibited because of adornment. It's prohibited to adorn the body.
In Torah, there is a prohibition of permanent tattoos, because it was the pagan, mainly because it was a pagan way of doing so, and there is a permanent, I don't know the right word is, change in your body that you are not allowed to do, not only because of pagan reasons, because the body simply doesn't belong to you. So just like you wouldn't take a building and just spray paint it with something, we are not allowed to do so. The body has to remain sacred. I do want to emphasize the myth. There's a big myth out there that if you have a tattoo, you cannot be buried in a Jewish cemetery. That's absolutely a myth. It's not true. It's I don't know where it comes from. It's a Baba Maisa, and we don't look down at anybody who has a tattoo. Everybody is always looked up with full respect, and I don't judge people. If you keep kosher, you don't keep kosher. It doesn't matter if you can be buried in a Jewish cemetery or get an aliyah. It doesn't. It's not. That's a personal choice. And lastly, it's interesting to see that, and I don't hate to bring it up, but that the Nazis, Ymach Shimon, did many things specifically, despite, to hurt the Jews, not just physically, but also with our traditions. So they made sure to tattoo people, they made sure to cremate people. So those are things to keep in mind. When I watch sometimes young kids, there's something that really pained me, and it was not judgmental, just pained me to watch a young teenager. She did a tattoo for her grandmother, a survivor, a Holocaust survivor. She did a tattoo for her grandmother to remember her. And it pained me to watch, because it was misguided she meant really well, but it was completely misguided what Judaism's value and traditions are. Any other questions?
I just want to add one thing. It's Menashe Ruveni here. As a volunteer in Chevra Kadisha for 22 years, I heard a few times that people ask me, is this true that you cut the skin where the tattoo is? And it's absolutely never happened when you do tehara or anything with the body.
Thank you, Menashe. Yes, that is very true. And thank you, Menashe, for being a volunteer at Cheva Kadisha, which is one of the most amazing thing a human can do, to volunteer to help a deceased body, to bring them a proper rest. And we're gonna have a full session on that, Tahara, and if anybody wants to get involved and that there's we to do so. Any other questions? Okay, with that, I wish everyone
Excellent.
a healthy week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
Shabbos. Good Shabbos, everybody.
Stay healthy.
Thank you.